You are listening to the Two and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
Thanks for pressing play on the Two and Out CFL podcast. I'm Sheldon Jones because Travis Kerr is off chasing bears in the Rocky Mountains. So joining me to do the recap this week, fresh off appearance with the Turf District, is Joe Balaneski. How you doing, Joe?
Not bad. Thanks for having me. It's been a while since I've been on here. You guys didn't have video the last time I was on here. You weren't even a member of the podcast, so.
That's true, but you know what? You're definitely our biggest fan. First person to buy anything from our store.
Merch, hat, got the mugs. Beautiful.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Mine haven't even come yet, but those look great. And you're rocking that new Edmonton jersey. I love that jersey.
Yeah, it's grown on me. I saw it at the home opener. Somebody had one in the tailgate, and I was like, yeah. And then when I went to the team store, I was like, yeah, that's what credit cards are for. So I'll just drop a few bucks on a new one. So
yeah, I got my MVP jersey for the Riders. We get a free jersey on the first year if we have our tickets for 3 years. If we guarantee them for 3 years, I guess. Right. So that'll hold me up for a while. But our new Obsidian jerseys, I think, are amazing. So I can't wait to get one of those as well.
Yeah, I saw a few of them again at the season opener against the Riders. They're actually really nice. I actually don't mind even like with the cresting.
Mm-hmm.
But as I think you guys said last week, and a few other people I've heard say, is like the lettering, that kind of dark lettering on a dark background. From a distance, it probably doesn't work, but up close, it's nice. But I can imagine it's a bit of a pain for actual play-by-play guys. And
yeah, I remember there's a lot of upset play-by-play callers with those BC jerseys they had there. All right, so before we get into the game recaps here, I just wanted to bring up, so when you're not watching CFL, I know you've been watching or attending some local wrestling with your daughter, who's become quite the fan of wrestling. And of course, with Travis and I being big wrestling fans, we got to bring it up here. So talk to me about kind of watching your daughter's wrestling fandom just blossom.
Yeah, I started her young. I think she was maybe about 4 or so, or maybe closer to 5, because I grew up watching wrestling, Stampede wrestling back in the day. And my dad and I would go, not every weekend, but probably a couple times a month when they came to town. And I got her. Because at the time I think I was just watching AEW, and I kind of started dabbling it back into WWE. And then she sat down one day and was just immediately enthralled by it. And yeah, it's must-watch viewing now. I have to record it all, and and we've started going to local promotion here in Edmonton. Love Pro Wrestling. They've been around for a couple of years, but I hadn't been to an indie show probably since the Stampede wrestling days, and it's definitely a different environment than watching or going to like an AEW show or a WWE show. Just it's much smaller venues, much closer to the action. And the first time we went, we were literally in the front row and dubbed in the splash zone. And we had to scatter out of the way a few times from the wrestlers diving through the ropes. And she loves it. We just went here again on Friday. And it's good. It's our daddy-daughter bonding time, I guess you can say. But I maybe she'll grow to love it and stick with it as she grows older. I mean, if she grows out of it, I'm not going to blame her. I mean, not a lot of girls probably stick with love of wrestling, but it's been fun. I'm really enjoying our time that we get to watch wrestling. So
awesome. And then just before we get into the CFL talk here, so you're one of the main people in charge of a wonderful CFL Fans Fight Cancer fundraiser dubbed the Stadnick Invitational, with the nice little logo with Indy on there that Greg from Piffles made up there. So the tournament is actually going to happen on July 20th in Regina, the day after the Bombers are in town to play the Riders. And I'm also golfing in it. My wife is sponsoring someone else in the tournament, not me.
Smart woman.
Smart. Yeah, smart on her part. So just tell us about how we are going to raise a lot of money with our questionable at best golfing.
Yeah, so The whole thing started a couple years back. Dave Stadnick invited me out to go golfing with him just one random day, and he was in Saskatchewan and I was visiting my in-laws in northern Alberta, so we met up. And I think that was kind of our first use of the term Stadnick Invitational. And then later that year, he invited me to the Riders game, and we set up a golf outing. And then last year it grew from 4 people to, I think we're up to 16.
Mm-hmm.
And now this year we're 21 people. I think the last count, I think we got a couple of maybes. And yeah, Dave last year threw it out on Twitter that he was going to donate 25 cents a stroke and $5 per lost ball to the CFL Fans Fight Cancer fundraiser. And yeah, we doing it again. This year we've added pars are $1, birdies are $5, and I can't remember what I put an eagle at. I think it was like $20 or something.
Yeah.
Because it's all for it's all for a good cause, obviously, but it also just it brings the fundraising for the good players closer to the rest of us that aren't really good players, right? So yeah. So last year I think we raised just over $600. This year I think we're gonna surpass that quite a bit.
Yeah.
We have with more players, but we actually got a ton of sponsors this year, people that are not playing but have chosen to pick a player or 2 or in some cases 6. Like Dave has 6 different sponsors. So I think we're definitely going to raise a lot of money. Yeah, so if you guys want to join, you can check out our Twitter account at StadnickINV. A lot of us, Sheldon retweets a lot of the stuff. I retweet a lot of the stuff on Twitter. So yeah, check it out. If you want to sponsor somebody, just let us know and we'll put you on the list. And yeah, and then the day of, we're going to throw the spreadsheet up online. Hopefully this year, Fraser doesn't break it. And then fingers crossed. And then, but on there's a live scoreboard updated as the players play through their round and the running totals of how much they're raising and all that stuff. So yeah, it's only going to grow. Dave and I have already started brainstorming about how to improve it for next year. So
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's kind of become a crazy monster, but it's fun. It's get to see a lot of our good friends that we socialize with on Twitter and all that. And if it becomes an annual thing, that's great.
Mm-hmm. I hope so. All right, so we'll get some news out of the way here first before we get into the recap. So first off, your Edmonton Elks have selected 6'7" receiver Zach Mathis from North Dakota State University in the CFL supplemental draft. So for those of our fans maybe who don't know how this works, supplemental draft is for players who were not declared as nationals at the time of the draft and basically follows the CFL draft order. But whoever's willing to kind of forfeit the highest draft pick gets it. And I think to nobody's surprise, Chris Jones forfeited his first round pick next year to get this receiver. So what are your thoughts with that? Is that too steep of a price, especially with the possibility of Curtis Rourke being available in this next year's draft class?
I mean, obviously he's a massive receiver, 6'7". I mean, the guy reaches his hand up and he's probably, almost 8 feet in the air, right?
Yeah.
I haven't looked at his stats and what he's done in college. I assume, I mean, we all know Chris Jones has a pretty good eye for pedigree. He's brought a lot of big name players into this league over the years. So if him and his scouting team feel that this guy's worth a first round pick, I'm not going to question it. As for Curtis Rourke being available next year, I don't think Edmonton's really looking for a quarterback per se. They got MBT this year, but they have Trey Ford, and I mean, I think you guys have talked ad nauseum about that whole situation. I've talked about it on Turf District and other places with friends, just offline, and it is what it is. I think they're still high on Trey Ford. I don't know if they're Curtis Rourke. If he does go, he's probably going to be a first overall pick. I mean, he's got the pedigree. I looked up his stats here before we started recording, and I mean, he's for all intents and purposes, probably better statistically than his brother is. And we all know what his brother did a couple of years back in the CFL. So Rourke's probably going to go 1-2 somewhere in there, in my opinion. Is it too high? If you don't need a quarterback, and you don't think you're going to get that quarterback, probably not, right? The only downside is that you don't have that first round pick next year, right?
Right.
So,
but I guess this guy, if he works out, then it's worth the first.
Yeah, then it is worth the pick. Yeah, and if he is considered a national, that does help with those roster spots. And I mean, then you got guys like right now on the Elks, you got like, you got Curly Gittens Jr. and you got Gavin Cobb and guys like that. There's nothing wrong in having, backups, right? You do need to fill those guys' spots if one gets injured or just if they need a break on a play or something like that. So, it's intriguing to see some of this, the supplemental draft stuff. It's a lot of it's interesting when you see it pop up on your Twitter feed from your team that this, and you're like, okay, what does that really mean, right?
It is like the Chris Jones supplemental draft, it seems, because they also took a different player, then gave up their 8th round pick as well earlier in May too. So so we'll see what happens. But like you said about depth, talking next here, so the Blue Bombers receiver Dalton Schoen, it's been announced that he'll miss the rest of the season with the injury he sustained in week 3. So they're already down Kenny Lawler. So like you said about having that depth there, it is important to have those players there. But it does look like Winnipeg is going to get some help. Farhan Lalji is reporting that Lucky Whitehead is finalizing a return to the team he started his CFL career with. So hopefully for their sake, he can fill that hole there. Speaking of injuries, it was announced today as the Riders resume practice that quarterback Trevor Harris has been placed on the 6-game injured list with a moderate knee sprain. So pretty vague there. I'm not sure. It doesn't look like it's season ending, but Coach Corey Mace doesn't have a timetable to return. So looks like this is going to be Shea Patterson's team for the short term. What do you think the Riders' chances are with the backup in there?
You probably know more about Shea Patterson than I do. I obviously don't really pay attention to the backups. I don't probably pay attention to the backups on my team that much, but but I mean, I'm not surprised Trevor Harris got hurt. I'm not saying he's injury prone, but he's always had. I think he would have had a much better career. He just seems to get injured at the most inopportune times. I mean, the Riders right now are 3-0. They're the best team in the West, and they're on bye week this week. But then they had their next 3 games are against Toronto, BC, and Montreal, right? So it's going to be a little tough sledding 3 of the best teams in the league right now. So it's going to be interesting to see if the rest of the team can kind of get around Shea Patterson and help him out and really, make his job easier. I think there's going to be a lot of work or a lot of handoffs to AJ Ouellette and the running. I think the running game for Saskatchewan in the next few weeks is going to be heavily depended on. You can't rely on a backup quarterback to be tossing the ball 40 times a game, right? So it's going to be really, it's going to show us what the Riders really are, right?
Right.
I'm not saying that the Riders aren't a good team this year. I mean, they've proven they've got 3 wins. They handily beat Hamilton last week, but I think especially against these really good teams, it's going to really make them show us exactly what kind of team they are and if they can bond together and come out and win a few without Trevor Harris. And like you said, it's not season ending, so that's good. That means, but at the same time, it's probably one of those injuries that if he plays on it or tries to play through it, even with a brace on or something, could potentially get worse and end up being season. And that could just be devastating for you guys, right?
Yeah, I think the one thing that's in the Riders' favor is we don't have Craig Dickinson coaching anymore. We have Corey Mace. So I think I think that's going to help us. I don't know. We'll see. And then, so a couple more things here. So Jonathan Rose has signed a 1-day contract to retire as a Red Black. He played for 4 seasons in Ottawa and then played 1 season for the Elks. He retires, but he's sticking around to become part of the O6 community relations team, acting as a liaison for players and community partners. So I think that's always cool when the American players stay up here and get jobs. So nothing but good there. And then finally, Team Canada at the Under-20 Football World Championships beat Japan 20-9 today to win the gold medal. And I don't know, as a Canadian, even better, Austria beat the USA earlier. So the USA
I was just going to say, it's always good when the Americans lose. So
yeah. So congrats to those. Hopefully, a lot of future CFL stars there.
The only thing I think about that is that played with 4-down rules, though, I believe. I think so.
I think it is too. I think they kind of mix the rules, but I haven't really looked into it too much.
Because I saw a few people, I think maybe it was Dave Campbell or somebody, or maybe it was Morley Scott here in Edmonton, was tweeted out that it was weird seeing a 4-down, an American-sized football field on CFL-sized field, right, or field area.
Yeah.
And but no, it's good that we won. It's our 3rd time in a row, I believe, too.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so first game of the season, or first game of this week was BC, and BC beat your Elks, unfortunately. So another game where Winnipeg lost, where Edmonton lost on a walk-off field goal. As an Elks fan, how does that make you feel? Dumb question, but
it's we're used to it, I would say. I mean, it's I don't know. It sucks when your team loses. You always want your team to win. I mean, we want to be Ryan Ballantyne and want our teams to go 18-0 every year, right? But obviously that doesn't happen. So I can't remember if I said it on the Turf District when I was on earlier this week, but the difference between last year even and this year, both the same records at this point in the season, but the difference is the point total that they're losing these games by. I think maybe it was Dave Campbell on Twitter said something like the Elks last year were 0-4, but the differential was like 51 or 57 points or something crazy like that. Obviously, there's that big blowout in BC last year, but this year they've lost by a total combined of 17 points.
Yeah.
So the games have been competitive. It's been close, which is good. They've all been entertaining games. But yes, it sucks that the last 3 games in particular have been by a field goal. And you look at like certain plays that happened that probably could have been the difference, right? And it is frustrating, but it is what it is. Just got to look for it. Like they're on bye week this week. See where they come back against Ottawa when they get back. But I mean, the way Ottawa played today, who knows what that game's going to look like. So
true. Yeah. So Vernon Adams had great protection again with the Lions O-line not giving up a sack for the 2nd consecutive game. Both the Elks and the Lions were able to get a decent amount of passing yards, but neither team was able to establish the running game, and both had trouble finishing drives for touchdowns. That's become quite the thing throughout the whole season here, is the lack of the running game. I think there's only been 100-yard game this entire season so far. What do you think might be causing that?
Well, in general throughout the league, or just in regards to Edmonton? Because when it comes to Edmonton, I think they're when it comes to Edmonton, they're relying too heavily on the pass, in my opinion. I mean, and they're, from a fan's perspective, I find them coming very one-dimensional, which isn't good. Kevin Brown's a great player. I just think that Edmonton's offensive line, at least right now, isn't able to open up those holes for the run game.
Yeah.
And then obviously trailing in games, you have to tend to rely on the pass as well. You can't necessarily run. In the league in general, though, I really don't know. I think maybe teams have just started, the defensive coordinators have just started figuring things out, and the offensive coordinators are a little behind on the thing. I can see that, and we know as the season goes on and players get banged up, and I think that's going to change. It's going to take a little bit of adjustment, but there's always going to be that balance eventually, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah. So Kevin Brown specifically, he had a 6.7 yard average this game, but he only got 6 carries. Like you said, it seems like they're abandoning the run, but McLeod Bethel Thompson has always been throwing it like 35, 40 times a game, even
Right.
in
Yeah.
Toronto. So
Yeah.
I guess that's just the type of quarterback he is in the system there. But Kevin Brown, he's just so dynamic. And like last year, he was just breaking runs left, right, and center. So it's just even as a Rider fan, I'm like, man, why can't this guy catch a break?
Yeah. And even he's not, I find that they're not really even getting him the ball in open space on those little dump passes or the checkdowns, right?
Mm,
I'm not saying he's been forgotten, but it is he's proven in the past, like you said, 6.7 yards last game. He averages, I think, over 5 in his career, right? Like he's been
mhm.
really good since he came into the league 2 years ago. And he was 1,000+ yard rusher last year. So I don't know why they don't look at it. I mean, if he gets stopped on one or two runs, then that doesn't mean the next time you guys get the ball, he's not gonna bust one open for 30 or 40, right?
Yeah,
I find CFL players, well, football players in particular, they're very streaky, and I think they need to get their confidence built up. And obviously, the more touches and the more plays that are in their direction are given to them, they tend to break it out. So I think they just need to start handing them the ball more and trusting him. He's going to find those holes. He's a very shifty little back, right?
yeah, agreed. So McLeod Bethel Thompson, he didn't have a great game. He did spread the ball around with 7 different receivers catching the ball. Dylan Mitchell was 4 for 8 for 81 yards. Arkell Smith 5 for 6, 70 yards, but 53 of those yards after catch. So that's a good
That's
positive thing
significant. Yeah.
there. And then Curly Gittens was 5 for 6 with 56 yards and a lone touchdown. But most surprising to me, Eugene Lewis, 1 catch, 3 targets for only 6 yards. What is up with the lack of production from the Eugene Lewis?
Yeah. Obviously, we all know Gino's a great dynamic receiver. He's that
Mm,
90-10 catch guy, right? And
yeah,
I think there's a bit of that chemistry between him and McLeod aren't there yet. They're both professionals. They're going to figure it out.
mm,
Um, I just think it's just weird not hearing his name. I mean, I think back to last season in the very first game against Saskatchewan. It was one of the first plays from scrimmage that the Elks had. It was that 100 and whatever 8 yard or whatever catch that he went out for, and that kind of like sadly that was his only. I think it was like one or three catches that day for him. But this year, I don't know what's going on. It's hard to say, but it's as a fan, it's at least we have those other weapons, right? Curly
yeah,
Gittens, you've got your Dylan Mitchell's come back strong this year. You've got all the other receivers and playmakers on the field, which is good. So the offense isn't the issue, in my opinion, when it comes to the Elks. They're McLeod's putting up numbers, right?
yeah,
So, well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe the passing game is the issue. We got to figure
well,
out their running
yeah,
game.
yeah. But it's interesting though that a Chris Jones team is having more success on offense than defense.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll just kind of leave it with that. We'll end with Boris Beatty. He was 2 for 2, one of them from 52, and then Dakota Prukop, he got another score with a sneak there. So you mentioned before that the Elks are going on bye week. Do you think we'll see any changes? Is it too soon for changes? Trey Ford, what are you thinking?
I I don't think it's Trey Ford time. I'm a huge Trey Ford fan. I love what he did last year. He's a very dynamic and amazing player.
Mm,
I just think when it comes to again, like I just said, the offense isn't the problem. They're putting up numbers, they're scoring points. And they're holding their own against really good teams like against Toronto 2 weeks ago, they put up 30 something points.
yeah,
Then this week against BC, which is another great team, they put up, 21 points and they're scoring, well, they only had the one touchdown this week, but I mean, they're putting up points and that last year they really weren't doing that. So I don't think it'd be nice to see Trey maybe squeezed in. I'm not saying on short yardage of that, but I think it would kind of mess with defensive coordinators if we for a series or two, threw him in there on a play or for a couple of plays. Just I like. There was a play. I can't remember if it was in the Ottawa game today or maybe it was the Calgary game yesterday, but the backup stayed in after a short yardage run, right? And I find that with Edmonton they haven't done that yet, and I think that Trey could probably be that guy. Nothing against Dakota Prukop. I love him. He's a great short yardage quarterback, but it'd be really nice to see Trey get some plays, even if because I mean, in the CFL we have that crazy rule where you can have two quarterbacks on the field at the same time.
Yeah, and Winnipeg's done that this year with Strebler.
Yeah, exactly, right? So
yeah. So now let's talk about the Lions here. So Vernon Adams was questionable to start the week, but he did enough to lead them to victory. He was 27 for 38 with 331 yards and 1 touchdown, 33 yards on the ground. He also spread the ball out to 8 different receivers. I noticed that in a lot of the games, the quarterbacks were really spreading the ball around. So Aiden Eberhardt leading the way with 6 catches for 70 yards. Javon Catoy had 5 for 68. Alexander Hollins, he might not be buying Bellinis for everyone after this one, as he's held to 4 catches on 8 targets for 55 yards. But that's still one of when Travis clipped that was amazing last week. And again, William Stanback held to only 42 yards on 11 carries, but they had David Mackey get 17 yards and 1 touchdown as well. This game just came down to whoever had the ball last, and unfortunately for the Elks, it was the Lions, and Sean White, he was perfect, 3 for 3, and he continues to be the most accurate kicker in the league. Next up for the Lions, they head to Hamilton to face the now 0-4 Ticats.
Yeah.
Yikes. All right, so now we move to Montreal at Toronto. So Montreal now has won 12 straight games going back to last year after they knocked off the Argos 30-20. The game itself was pretty back and forth, but the difference here is Montreal scored touchdowns when the Argos were settling for field goals.
Right.
Now, we can talk about this game a lot, but first of all, I think we got to go recognize the elephant in the room here, which is my tweeting about the extremely polarizing dribble kick as it made another appearance here halfway through the third quarter when Jeshwin Antwi pulls it off again for I think the third time, where he kicks the ball over the line of scrimmage and resets the downs. So I put up a poll on Twitter, which seemed to upset some random fans as well as fans of the show. So if you did take offense to it, I apologize, but it was very tongue-in-cheek. I hope everyone can realize that now. And Travis and I both agree that this rule is awesome and it adds excitement to the game. But what are your thoughts on the rule, Joe?
Yeah, I think it's great. It's one of those little Canadian CFL rules that because I think there was I saw somebody retweeted an American sports guy covering it or talking about it, and he's like, what the heck is going on here, right? And it's one of those things. It's like when you see here when you have the guy kick the ball into the end zone and the guy kicks it out and it goes back and forth, and you get all that craziness. It's something that's just specifically ours, and we have to embrace it. I get why it upsets fan bases because they may not know or understand the rule, but again, the CFL and the owners and all of that and the board of governors and everything voted this year for the rule changes, and it was brought upon the rule changes this year, and they all voted to keep it in. So I think Montreal is the only one that has successfully completed it or tried it. I don't know if other teams have tried it, but it's one of those, you're just mad because it's against your team or your team hasn't done it yet, or your team hasn't succeeded at doing it yet, right? And and the color commentators say it's a very risky play because if you don't get it over, or if you're over that line, you kick it, or if you don't kick it far enough, or if you kick it and the defender's onto it and falls on it first, that's a turnover, right? So it's great. I love it. I hope they do it more, just not against my team, but it's great.
Like, I don't see why other teams aren't trying it. I think before the Alouettes started it last year, the last time it was actually tried was I think in 2014. The BC Lions tried it.
Okay.
So that's how long it's been, and I see a lot of people thinking that, oh, it's exploiting a terrible rule, and you know, it, it just like I said, it was tongue in cheek, but when I say cry more, like I'm kind of being serious because
Yeah.
like it's it's like you said, it's a very risky play, and all defensive coordinators would have to do, and I actually saw it in the Calgary game. There was a big second and long, and they kept a linebacker short, and they had everyone else drop back.
Right.
All you have to do is keep one linebacker there near the line of scrimmage,
Yeah.
spying the running backs coming out of the back, and they're not gonna do it. So,
Absolutely.
uh, like,
The only thing I'll say is I hope it doesn't start to become like every game we see one.
right,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like
yeah,
I don't want to see, all 9 teams trying to do it every week kind of a thing.
hmm
Like it's fun when you see it once or twice a week or like once a game or something like that. But I don't
yeah,
want to see every single team trying it multiple times a game because then it just gets like ridiculous, right?
right.
But you said you put out that poll and people are, you know, giving you crap about it. It's Twitter. What do you expect?
I know. Yeah, I know. I like to have a little bit too much fun sometimes on Twitter, and I think Travis is glad I'm handling it, but at the same time, maybe he's not glad because some people saying they
Hey,
weren't going to listen anymore. So I hope they
but
weren't being serious.
but at
But
the same time, if your tweets you're putting out like that are getting good and bad responses, that means people are seeing it on both sides
yeah,
of the ball, so to speak.
yeah.
And as that old adage is, any press is good press, or any,
hmm I
so
even tweeted that as well, and then somebody brought up P Diddy. Uh, but, um,
let's not go there.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But like I said, I'm gonna keep having fun on Twitter, and hopefully, like you said, this doesn't get crazy. But I hope that it can just become one of those quirky things that everyone's
Yeah,
fine with, and
absolutely.
we just move on. So getting to the game here, so Cody Fajardo went 33 of 41 for 284 yards, one touchdown, one interception, 13 yards on three carries. The Alouettes didn't really stretch the field that much, though, as Cody's average completion was only 6.9 yards. But short yardage QB Caleb Evans was able to fool the Argos defense and complete a 44-yard touchdown to Cole Speaker on a 3rd and 1. I love that play. I always
Yeah,
love when the teams try to go high risk reward there,
yeah.
and it just gets the crowd going.
And the thing that I saw it here when Jason Moss was in Edmonton. I find Jason Moss's teams that he likes to be a little more risky with his play
Mm,
calling.
yeah.
And that's great because it keeps the defenses on their toes. I think Toronto fully expected Caleb Evans just to dive over that pile, and he
hmm
stepped back and he just like a little kid threw the ball up, and he nice little
Yeah.
feather pass right into his hands, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's again goes back to what we just talked about the kick, right? It's high risk, high reward, right?
hmm So again, running back Walter Fletcher only had 11 yards and 6 carries, but again, as you said, Jason Moss offense, he doesn't really use his running backs as much anyway. So if you're an Owls fan, you're 4-0, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be fine with that as long as it keeps going. Nine Alouette receivers caught the ball, with the aforementioned Cole Speaker leading the way with a perfect 8 catches on 8 targets for 113 yards and the one long touchdown. Tyson Philpott also added a 38-yard touchdown reception as part of his 90 yards. And Reggie White Jr. had a quiet game after last week's good game with only 3 catches for 48 yards. Montreal looks to remain undefeated when they host Calgary Stampeders next. And then going to their side here, Cameron Dukes had an off game, 22 for 32 with 199 yards and one interception. Uh, they threw the backup in when the game got out of reach there, and Brian Scott came in, but he did go 5 for 5, 79 yards, and was able to find Mackay Polk in the end zone for a 40-yard touchdown. Uh, yeah, it was the score kind of flattered the Argos there a little bit with that late touchdown. I don't think it was a great outing by them, but I
It
still
was
think they're a pretty good team, so I wouldn't look too much into this one.
Yeah, the first half was definitely it was a lot closer than the outcome was because and like you said, it flattered him because with that late TD, but I think just Montreal is just they're
Not good.
they're a really good team, and I think it's a lot of people didn't expect it. I think a lot of people still think that they fluked out that Grey Cup win last year, and they're showing that they didn't. And
Mm.
you know, people got or teams got to start taking them serious, right? Like they're showing that, like you said, 12 wins in a row. Like that's nothing to sneeze at. That's
Mm.
in this league, that's very impressive, right?
Yeah.
So
Polk, he did lead the Argos in receiving of 5 catches for 60 yards and that 1 touchdown. Tavares Daniels had 4 catches, 49 yards, and Rashid Bailey had 3 for 39. Kadeem Carey, he had probably the best outing as a running back with 61 yards on 9 carries and added 26 yards in the air as well. But Kadeem Carey's always been really good back, so he's taken replacing AJ Ouellette pretty good there in Toronto. But Toronto has a short week coming up as they head to Regina on Thursday night to play the Riders. But again, as we mentioned before, the Riders will be out without Trevor Harris. So might be a good bounce back game for them there. And now we move to Winnipeg at Calgary. So Calgary, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this game because this was a terrible game. So Calgary, they beat Winnipeg 22-19. Rene Paredes, he hit a walk-off field goal in overtime. So if you watched, I think, the last 5 minutes of the game in overtime, it was actually a really good game. But the rest of it was just...
And that's pretty much what I watched. I mean, I went back and I watched the entire game.
Yeah.
And I regret doing that.
Yeah.
Because I literally saw the last 2 minutes of the game and then the overtime, and I was like,
yeah, it was painful. Speaking of painful, Zach Collaros got hurt right before halftime on a legal but a pretty hard hit. Looked like he took kind of the helmet to the abdomen there. I don't know if there was any broken ribs or if he just kind of got the wind knocked out of him. He tried to come back in and then they didn't have him come back in after halftime. So we'll have to see what the injury report says there. But between Jake Mayer and Chris Drevler, they weren't very accurate on their passes. Kind of short-term passes were okay, but neither one of them could hit
overthrows or a lot of high throws.
Yeah, neither one of them could hit a deep ball, and it was a lot of tune-outs and a lot of field goals. But we appreciate the plug there, guys. So Zach went 8 for 12 with 55 yards and an interception before he got hurt. And then Chris came in and he went 14 for 24, 170 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And then a very kind of sad stat here is Chris Drevler was Winnipeg's leading rusher with only 27 yards. Brady Oliveira was held to 26 yards on 10 carries. So a 2.6 yard average for the second best player in the league as voted by TSN here this year. I don't know how that revisionist history is going to be pretty interesting on that top 50 list, AJ.
The thing is that kind of just goes back to what you mentioned about teams having issues running, but I really when you think of Oliveira, they always called him the next Andrew Harris, and he proved that last year. And to see those numbers is really shocking, actually. But that almost shows you that there's something wrong in Winnipeg. That team has dropped off from being a runner-up in the Grey Cup last year, who quite handily got their way there. It's not like they squeaked in. And now they're 0-4. And as you said before, now with Hamilton losing that, there's 0-4 teams. And I'm going to say it that Winnipeg's probably the worst out of all of them.
Oh, for sure they are. Yeah.
Like, I think if the Elks played the Bombers next week, the Elks would beat them easily. And or if Hamilton, like even Hamilton played them, yeah.
Yeah, I think Hamilton and Edmonton both have had like they've both had games where one play goes a different way, they're winning that game.
Yeah.
And you can't say that about Winnipeg yet. I know they only lost by 2 to BC, but
that score flattered them substantially because there was a lot of few points were scored because there was a point where it was only like they only had like 10 points or something late in the game, and it was a lot more flattering. at the end, right? So
Yeah. So Nick Dembski led the receivers with 6 catches for 54 yards. Drew Wolodarski had 1 touchdown, 43 yards on 4 catches. But the big thing, I guess, here for Winnipeg fans is Sergio Castillo went 4 for 4, including a franchise record 60-yarder. So congrats to Sergio. I know Frazier's probably, at least he has that to look forward to as a Bomber fan. So there's that. So they are going to look to see if they can get out of their slump when they host the Red Blacks this week. But like you said before, the Red Blacks didn't look too bad today. So the Red Blacks are kind of a Jekyll and Hyde team, but we'll talk about that in a little bit here. And then I'll just quickly run through Calgary stats here. So Jake Maier was 28 for 43, 239 yards and a touchdown and an interception. He wasn't accurate at deep balls at all, like I said before. Average completion of 5.6 yards. That's low. You need to be getting those 7 to 10 yards, I'd say, if you want. If you want to
especially
consistency.
Especially if you're only averaging, like 3 or 4 yards on the run, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and like you said, Dedrick Mills, he had 16 carries for 51 yards. Mark and Michelle led the receivers with 9 catches for 75 yards and a lone touchdown. And just like Sergio, Rene Paredes went 4 for 4 on field goals, but he hit the big one at the end to win it. And then Cody Grace actually added 3 punt singles as well. So he had the hat trick of punts. Singles, I guess. So that's I didn't know John Ryan was still playing in the league, so that's good. And it doesn't get easier for Calgary, though, as they head to Montreal to face the unbeaten Alouettes next week. All right, Joe, we got one more. Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, so all the games next week in Eastern?
All of them except for the Riders, the Toronto. Yeah, this is actually the week that I believe from Piffles, Alex and Steve and some other people are going down to hit the 3 games there. Yeah. So I don't know. It's too bad that they couldn't have the all 4 games in the East.
That would be nice.
Yeah. Okay. So last game. So tonight, as we recorded it, it was Hamilton taking the loss in Ottawa. So this game was kind of interesting. It started off with both teams getting a quick touchdown. Hamilton forced a fumble on the opening kickoff, much like the Riders did last week against Hamilton, and got a quick touchdown. And for the Ticats' sake, it was Tim White who got that first touchdown. So hopefully that got him some confidence, because he's certainly not had a great start to the season, Joe.
Yeah, no, and it was a pretty nice catch in the back of the end zone. And I think, as you know, we'll discuss, but yeah, the rest of the game for him, you heard his name a lot, and usually it was him catching the ball and getting a first down and things like that. So he was definitely key for the Ticats in this game. The only thing I would say is they probably maybe depended on him a little too much in this game.
Yeah. And then, so I guess the story of the game is, outside of those first 2 touchdowns by each, or 1 touchdown by each team, it was a lot of offense between the 20s. They weren't able to finish drives, and there was a lot of field goals. And then at the end, we had 2 quick touchdowns where Drew Brown was able to find Justin Hardy for a crucial late touchdown with 2 minutes left in the game. But Hamilton and Bo Levi Mitchell, they answered with a quick touchdown drive of their own, but they left like 28 seconds, I think, left on the clock. And when you have the returners that Ottawa has, which they didn't even kick to Devontae Dedmon, right. They did a squib kick, but still was able to return it to like midfield. That's
there was some angry. I didn't look and see if they were Ticat fans or what, but there were a lot of comments about the squib kick. Why would you squib kick it when you? But at the same time, as you said, they got Devontae Dedmon. Yeah. We all know what he can do. But
he was killing.
But at the same time, when you're squibbing it and the guy returned it from the 45 or the 40 up to the 55, like the guys on the call even said that it was, 2 quick plays and you're within field goal range. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
And it's funny to see people 1 minute cheering and praising the calls by the referees, and then the very next play they're criticizing the league and says that it's a conspiracy and the league is rigged and all of this. But that's the CFL for you, right? Anything can happen in the last 3 minutes. It's great.
Yeah.
I love it. It's why it's the best game in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so like you said, 2 quick plays, and then and Lewis Ward was able to make it hit the walk-off. He was perfect outside of the opening convert, but he made up for that in a big way with that walk-off field goal. So I'll just go through kind of the stats here quickly. So Bo Levi went 30 for 45 for 322 yards and 2 touchdowns. Really, you can't ask much more for Bo than that. Like, it looks like he's, I wouldn't say he's peak Calgary Stampeders Bo Levi, but it seems like, at least for Ticat fans' sake, I know you're 0-4, but he seems to be better than last year.
I think he's healthy. I think that's the thing. He looks, obviously he's more mobile this year. Mm-hmm. They were talking heavily about it on the game that he's been running more. I think they were saying he had like a 10.7 average on his runs this year. But I think it's just that he's healthy, because that last year or two he was in Calgary, and then even last year in Hamilton, the games that he did play, he just didn't look comfortable. Like the last year in Calgary in particular, you could see when he threw the ball, he was hurt. And typical quarterback doesn't want to come out, things like that, right? And I'm not a professional quarterback. I can't, criticize them. But at the same time, I kind of understand where they're coming from. But I think it's just that he's healthy now.
Yeah.
Because he's making throws now. Like that throw to White in the back of the end zone at the first drive. That was like typical stuff we saw when he was in Calgary.
Right. Yeah. And if he's throwing it 45 times a game, that must mean that his shoulder's, good to go. Yeah.
100%.
So like I said, Tim White, bounce back game for him. He had 8 catches, 118 yards, and 1 touchdown. Stephen Dunbar Jr. had 90 yards on 4 catches, and Shamar Bridges, he continued his impressive season. Didn't have as many yards, 39 yards on 6 catches, but again, he got another touchdown. So again, it's like a silver lining for the 0-4 Ticats, but Shamar Bridges was kind of picking up that slack that Tim White wasn't having there, and then this game, we saw them both get touchdowns, so that's nothing, I think, but positive for Ticat fans to look forward to.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I was just gonna say. I think same thing with the Ticats, same thing with the Elks, is that I think once they get a win, either of the team gets a win, I think something's gonna click, and they're gonna rattle off 2 or 3 wins in a row. Because again, with Hamilton, the playmakers are there. Even on Hamilton's defense, they were ball hawking today, right? So there weren't a lot of interceptions, but they were around the ball quite a bit. And I think that's, I think if Hamilton gets 1 win, it's gonna snap something in Bo, and he's gonna lead them to like 3 or 4 wins in a row, and that East is gonna get really close really fast.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening. Greg Bell had 13 carries for 56 yards. Mark Leggio was 3 for 3 on field goals. And then an interesting development that they were bringing up on the broadcast. Apparently, they didn't really know how the rule works, but so Tim White was lined up, or he was on the depth chart as a designated American, which means he could come in and he can sub for a Canadian up to 49% of the snaps. So they were saying that he was, he only had 1 snap left, which wasn't actually accurate. He only had 1 snap left if a Canadian came off. Like, he can play any other time, right, as long as there's 2 full Canadians on there. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up just in case some of our listeners were kind of confused. I know my dad was texting me, what's the designated American? So
I actually had to look it up before we got on here to because I was like, because I know what the designated, because they got the designated national American, which is where you can take an American and basically say he's Canadian.
Yeah, if he's been on the team for 3 years or been in the league for 5. Yeah.
And it counts towards that national spot, which is great. But I was like confused. I thought that's what they were talking about. But no, apparently I didn't even know that there was this. But yeah, it makes sense that it's another talking point for those guys, right, on TV. So
But it was interesting because it was the first time I think I ever remember anyone
A lot of
talking about
emphasis
it.
on it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah,
there's a little. It's not as big of a deal in most games, right?
yeah. And then so Ottawa stats, we had Drew Brown. He went 24 for 39 with 265 yards and a touchdown. Raquel Armstead had 51 yards on 10 carries, and he also had 6 catches for 53 yards. And then Dustin Crum had the 1-yard sneak for the touchdown. Jalen Acklin led receivers with 7 catches for 90 yards, and Justin Hardy had 6 for 74, including the touchdown that put them in the lead with 2 minutes left. And then Frankie Griffin, I didn't have a lot of defensive stats here, but he led the team with 11 defensive tackles, so wanted to spot like that. And then, like we said, Lewis Ward came in, kicked the field goal as time expired, and Ticats went 0-4.
Yeah, I think with Lewis, you like you said before, him missing that convert, he knew he. I don't think that was his fault though. I think the wind was doing crazy things.
Yeah,
in that first half. So I think, but you could see it on his face when he hit that. He knew he redeemed himself. Yeah. And that's kind of every kicker's dream, obviously, other than doing it in the Grey Cup, for example. But no, and he's a local kid, right? So it's probably good to do that in front of the home crowd and break all those crazy records for number of days. And it was 2,000 and some days they hadn't beat the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and so
is people in the nation's capital were happy tonight. Well, Joe, I want to thank you for doing this, and to all the listeners, it's going to get better next time when Travis is back.
Oh, what? When it's me and Travis and you get booted to the...
Well, I might miss a show coming up, so maybe that'll happen. So again, thanks to Joe. Thanks to all listeners. Long live the dribble kick, and we will see you in a few days to preview Week 5 in the CFL season.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.